We're going to do it together, okay?
Okay.
It is one last mission
Okay, have a great fight.
for two men who first answered the call to serve 8 decades ago.
I'm very proud. Thank you very much.
They are the heroes of World War II. One of them, 102 years old.
This is in green.
He was there the very day America was first attacked, plunging our country into war. The other, an army soldier held prisoner for months by the Nazis in Germany.
Yeah.
Their service and sacrifice makes them among the very greatest
It's been a long, long time.
of a great generation.
Oh, it's amazing. This is so awe-inspiring.
And even after a century on Earth,
Is there something odd about waving an American flag right outside the Kremlin?
it turns out
Поддерживай, друзья, да.
their adventure isn't over just yet.
It was the highlight of my life, in a way.
Join us as we travel with these two veterans
Let's be friends forever.
Thank you for being here.
Oh,
On everything.
it's an honor. It's an honor.
halfway around the globe
It made me kind of feel at home since my mother is Russian.
to a place where strangers
He's full of wonderful stories to tell.
in a strange land
I'm proud of this moment and happy.
pay tribute for the very first time.
Something that never happened to me before. Somebody doing something for me because they think I was a hero or something.
A place where allies turned adversaries join hands in unity once again. Tonight, we're on a journey to Russia for a gathering of veterans, decades in the making.
And I'm just thrilled that I can do it.
It's a celebration of soldiers who may have worn different uniforms and spoke different languages, but found common ground in a cause,
We're like one people.
fighting for freedom.
We have a lot of love for each other.
Think you'll be back?
I'll be back if I ever get another chance to do it while I'm still young.
Meeting in Moscow. A final reunion for the heroes of World War II.
Their arrival at the Kremlin headlined the Moscow Evening News.
Ветераны из 3 стран встретились в России, чтобы почтить память героев и жертв.
Cameras following their every move. For many in Russia, this was the first time they'd ever met an American, much less one with this kind of role in history.
I thank the Russians.
Спасибо огромное, Рус.
For Harold Radish, this trip to this place is the realization of a lifelong dream.
Ever since I was a little kid, I've heard about this, but now I am here, and thank God that I am. Red Square.
The 97-year-old veteran never imagined he'd see this in person. If only his mom could see him now.
Coming to Russia was a sort of a family kind of thing. My mother and father grew up in Russia, and they came to America, and that's where I was born, in America. And if I ever told my mother that I was going back to Russia, she'd say, "You're crazy." Oh boy, I could almost change religions, it's so nice.
On this night during this visit, the buildings in this city of 12 million people aren't the only things glowing. So is this U.S. Army veteran, suddenly the toast of the town in Moscow. Harold is one of 2 World War II veterans representing the United States in a rare multinational celebration of service that has brought together allies from Russia, France, and America for the first time. A mission carried out in part by the Greatest Generations Foundation, a charity that honors the sacrifice of those who've served.
As we're coming up to our 20th anniversary of our foundation, it's always been a wish of mine to come back here to Russia and to bring Americans back with us to honor all those who have gone before us.
And in Russia, a lot of people, soldiers and civilians, have gone before us. The former Soviet Union lost more people than any other country in World War II, an estimated 27 million people in all, most of them civilians, as many as 9 million soldiers.
I realized that they did a lot for us because during the war, they were fighting the Germans and keeping the Germans occupied so that we didn't have to send a lot of troops. We could use our troops to fight in France, to get through Germany.
Give them a salute too, okay?
This gathering of heroes at the Alexander Garden, just outside the Kremlin walls, pays tribute to those soldiers. Next to this eternal flame is the tomb of the unknown soldier. In it, the body of a soldier killed in World War II, or as the Russians call it, the Great Patriotic War. The soldier died in the Battle of Moscow in late 1941, at the spot where Nazi forces got closest to the Soviet capital, just 19 miles outside of town. The Battle of Moscow was one of the most important battles of the war and among the most deadly, with more than 1 million total casualties. A deep respect for the war and those who fought it is embedded in this country's culture, even to this day.
They seem to recognize their soldiers. They have all sorts of statues, etc., cemeteries, and other places where they recognize their soldiers.
Very good teacher.
And it's the reason these men are so revered.
It's very nice, and I really appreciate it, to meet with the people from around the world, different countries. It's just wonderful. And we're like one people. I was captured. I was a prisoner of the Germans.
They are especially entranced by Harold's story.
A few months, okay.
A Jewish man taken captive by the Nazis.
To make sure that I wouldn't have any real problems because of my religion, I got rid of my dog tags. Sometimes I say to myself, was I a coward? But it saved my life, and that was the most important thing.
In early 1945, at just 19 years old, he was captured and held as a prisoner of war at Stalag 12A, a POW camp in Germany, for 4 months. First came the illness and starvation.
And then, of course, you had all the bugs. You had lice, you had cockroaches, all kinds of stuff that we'd never seen in our lives before.
Finally, in the spring of that year, as the war neared its end, Allied soldiers arrived and liberated the camp.
When we got up in the morning, the British were there, and they had almost like a Red Cross wagon outside with some food. I remember, it was noodles, it was hot, and it was good.
At last, a free man, Harold spent his post-war years as a school woodshop teacher.
Victory or defeat.
And in recent years, he served as an ambassador for the Greatest Generations Foundation.
See that? Come to Russia, you got 2 blondes pushing you.
Traveling all over the world, telling his story and honoring those millions of others who served in World War II and helped win it.
I'm going to shake his hand.
Including the very men he now embraces, right here in Red Square, of all places. For a man who has experienced a lot of unexpected things in his life, add this to the list.
At my age, to be able to be here and to see all of this is something that's luck, something that's very, very important.
This is a sacred spot for the people of St. Petersburg, a place they visit throughout the year to remember those relatives buried here. The beauty of this cemetery belies the cruelty that necessitated these hallowed grounds in the first place. About 500,000 people, most of them civilians, are buried in these mass graves on this site, beneath grass-covered mounds marked by the year they died in what many historians consider a genocide. The siege of Leningrad was a barbaric blockade that choked off this city from much of the rest of the world for 900 days during World War II, and left 1 million people dead, mostly from cold and starvation. From September 8, 1941 to January 27, 1944, the Nazis surrounded this city. It was Hitler's intention to erase St. Petersburg from the face of the earth. The easiest way to do it: starve its people to death. At its worst, as many as 100,000 people per month were dying of hunger. Some even resorted to cannibalism.
I believe it's important for the next generation to understand the tremendous sacrifice that was played out by the Russians during World War II. As you know, the number is staggering.
It's so crazy to fight that the war is nuts. It's not the kind of thing. It is better to talk and talk and talk.
When the Soviets finally beat back the Germans in 1944, the celebration here was muted because the losses had been so great. On this day, World War II veterans from Russia and France and the United States visit the mass graves and pay tribute. For months, locals here had been planning, preparing, and anticipating the arrival of these World War II heroes, and wanted to make sure the melancholy parts were matched by the musical. That's where these children come in. During a private performance at the famed Hermitage Museum, kids dressed in miniature 1940s Red Army uniforms, performing for a captivated crowd of foreigners. Hard to say who was more impressed, the concertgoers or the kids, who jockeyed for a chance to stand next to and meet these beloved audience members. Children are taught World War II history at an early age in this country, but never could they imagine learning it from a living historian like 102-year-old Mickey Ganich.
First, my mother is Russian. My dad was Serbian.
He too has close ties to this part of the world.
But I've never been to this country before.
As he told this Russian news crew during this interview inside a World War II museum, he joined the Navy in January 1941 because things around the world weren't looking good. After boot camp, he reported to the battleship USS Pennsylvania. On December 7th, 1941, docked at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, he had football on his mind.
We were scheduled to play the USS Arizona for a fleet football championship 1 o'clock that day.
At 5 minutes to 8 that morning, he already had his football clothes on when the Japanese torpedoes started flying.
They hit us with a 500-pound bomb. Missed me by 45 feet. It came between the two masts, came on down, exploded away below me there.
Amazingly, he wasn't hurt, but the attack he survived thrust the United States into a war that already consumed much of the world.
A date which will live in infamy.
A war the Russians were already fighting.
The next day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, blocks long, people lined up, wanted to join the service. They wanted to do their part.
Mickey went on to fight throughout the South Pacific throughout the rest of the war until his ship was bombed once again in Okinawa at war's end.
I was able to get patched up enough so we got back to the States by ourselves.
Most every December 7th, Mickey returns to Hawaii to mark the anniversary of the attack he survived. And he'll be there again in a couple of weeks for the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Hard to believe it was 8 decades ago he traveled the world fighting for freedom.
I thought maybe 10, 15 years ago I thought I'd make it, but never made it.
And hard to believe at 102 years old, against all odds, he's still traveling and bringing as much attention as he can to the heroes of World War II, no matter which country they call home.
God is looking out for me. God bless me to be here, and God bless the Russians too. Thank you very much.
Welcome back as we travel with the Greatest Generations Foundation to Russia for a once-in-a-lifetime gathering of World War II heroes. We've come here with Pearl Harbor survivor Mickey Ganich.
The Dodgers.
Dodgers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
I know.
they moved out of New York, out of Brooklyn.
And Harold Radish, an Army soldier held prisoner of war by the Germans at the end of World War II. While for decades it has seemed the Russians were laser focused on the Cold War, in recent years their attention has turned again to the 1940s and what they called the Great Patriotic War. The Soviets' victory in World War II is 80 years later a big part of their national identity.
In my religion, I was always envious of you guys. You went to church and you were there 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
When we went to synagogue, we had to stay all day.
And nowhere is that more glaring than at the opulent Cathedral of the Armed Forces, opened just a year ago. It is an unusual mix of patriotism and religion. Its centerpiece, a 300-foot gold-domed church.
Wow. This is really something. Made the trip worthwhile.
Located at a place called Patriot Park. Vladimir Putin opened the memorial and museum himself, and it's been referred to as a military Disneyland. Attached to it, a mile-long museum with war mementos and recreations. Total cost of this place, a reported 6 million rubles. That's about $86 million.
Подвиг народа, которую вы сегодня посетите.
It is not the only place Putin spared no expense, like here at the Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Moscow. 100,000 square feet of World War II vignettes, some complete with digital recreations of battles.
God, what a job they did.
It is so real for Harold Radish, it's almost unnerving.
This museum is so realistic that the PTSD is pushing. It's pushing up. And you're almost ready to leave to get out in the open air.
And in this impressive room, the names of 12,000 recipients of the Hero of the Soviet Union Award, one of the nation's highest honors, most of them earned during World War II.
Oh, it's amazing. This is so awe-inspiring and so big.
Seems they don't do anything small here in the biggest country in the world. At least not when it comes to remembering the war that helped them emerge as a modern military power. The war they are so clearly proud of to this day.
Доброй ночи, родной Ленинград. Ой, ты дал.
It is just about time to go home for World War II hero Harold Radish. He turned 97 years old just yesterday, and what better birthday present than a trip to his parents' homeland?
How was it?
Wonderful ride, little noisy.
A place he could never imagine visiting.
It was wonderful being with you young people. It makes me feel more friendly to people of a different country.
As the veterans boarded a boat to cruise St. Petersburg's Neva River, he summed up his time here best.
This is a good turn in my life. The twists are different, but this is a good turn.
A week spent with the heroes of World War II after a lifetime apart. They may not have known each other before now,
Yeah, you're welcome. That's it.
but they share a bond few others can understand.